Toyota remains optimistic that Truex Jr. will return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024, and Junior Motorsports might jump up to the Cup Series in 2024. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead by starting to talk about Chuck E. Cheese. As Adam Starr reported on Saturday that Chuck E. Cheese unveiled new Hendrick promotions, giving out e-tickets on its app when HMS drivers finish on the podium. If a driver ends up finishing first from Hendrick, I believe you get 400 or 500 tickets, and I think the top 4 finishers, I think, do end up getting some VIP passes. This is really interesting to see. Obviously, Chuck E. Cheese signed a promotion deal with Hendrick Motorsports. I think it's a really cool Hendrick promotion, and I love that they are doing this promotion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Saturday that Frank Keller, who's the Daytona president, says that track officials met with the Jaguars this week, but they don't have anything to update currently at the moment, and talks are only beginning. Obviously, it was reported about a week and a half ago, I believe, from Adam Stern, that there's been a lot of talk that the Jacksonville Jaguars might use Daytona International Speedway to play football games, which is not the first time that we've seen football games played in Daytona. I think they played back in the 50s and the 60s as well, before NASCAR came mainstream. A lot of these NFL teams were playing in the Daytona International Speedway Stadium. Obviously, I think it's really interesting to see if it's going to happen. Obviously, one of the reasons why there's talk about this is so they can play somewhere else over the next 2 years, while the current Jacksonville Jaguars stay on the TIAA Bank Stadium gets rebuilt currently at the moment. There's some upgrades coming into play, and it's very interesting to see, and we'll see what happens going forward if it does end up getting approved. I think it'd be really cool to see, basically, because we've seen football games, of course, played in racing tracks. Obviously, you saw Bristol Motor Speedway, I think back to 2016, you had the battle basically at Bristol, which is really cool. I think it was between Tennessee and Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. Overall, I think it's a really cool decision that they're looking at it, and it'd be really awesome to see some NFL play at Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, a lot of people, even racing fans, were probably just show up just to see the Jacksonville Jaguars play there. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Canadian Grand Prix. Obviously, yesterday we had a couple of races going on, including the Canadian Grand Prix, and we saw a domination day by Max Verstappen, where he went on to win his 41st career Formula One race. I believe this is his 4th consecutive Formula One victory as well, and now Max Verstappen has a 74-75 point gap, actually a 71 to 72 point gap, currently at the moment right now over Sergio Perez, and now he's tied with Ayrton Senna on the all-time wins list. Max Verstappen is continuing to dominate. He's won 6 out of the 8 races that have been run so far, and unless Verstappen has a complete collapse in the next 6 or 7 weeks, or how many weeks we have left in Formula One, I think Verstappen is easily going to lock up the championship. The next F1 race is a couple weeks from now. Fernando Alonso got a second, and I believe Lewis Hamilton finished third, so great day for all of those drivers. Congratulations, though, to Max Verstappen on winning the Canadian Grand Prix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about IndyCar at Road America. As while you had the Canadian Grand Prix going, before they had the start of the IndyCar race at Road America. And it was a very chaotic race of multiple safety cars and basically full course yells that ended up taking place. But we saw a domination day from Colton Herta. Unfortunately, though, Andretti Autosport made a terrible call and a terrible strategy call that cost Colton Herta the victory, and Colton dropped to 5th. Meanwhile, Alex Palou was running second majority of the day, got around Colton Herta with around 7 or 8 laps to go, and went on to win his 3rd race in the last 4 weeks in his 2nd consecutive race. Alex Palou right now has a 74-point lead over Marcus Ericsson, which I think is the largest championship lead we've seen in about 3 years. Alex Palou, obviously, there's a lot of talk about his future, that he might be leaving Chip Ganassi at the end of the season and might be headed over to Arrow McLaren, because I think eventually wants to go to Formula One. Though, why would you leave Chip Ganassi when you're dominating as much as you are, considering the fact that Marcus Ericsson is also on the radar of multiple teams, including Arrow McLaren and Andretti at this current moment. Alex Palou, though, continuing domination. I think unless Alex Palou has a complete collapse, I think he's easily going to win the championship this year. Congratulations to Alex Palou on winning the IndyCar race at Road America. Congratulations to him on getting the victory. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ryan Hunter-Reay. As Ryan Hunter-Reay spoke to Chris DeHart, I think it was, and he says that he will be at Mid-Ohio driving the number 20 car for Ed Carpenter Racing. Now, it's expected that Ryan Hunter-Reay is going to finish the season in the number 20 car for Ed Carpenter Racing. Ryan Hunter-Reay ran his first race with Ed Carpenter Racing and went on to finish 17th, which is a very solid run. Obviously, we know that Connor Daly will not be driving that car anymore this season, despite Bitnow staying around, even though Bitnow has been very loyal to Connor Daly for the last couple of seasons. Ryan Hunter-Reay will now be the driver for the rest of this season. I think Ryan Hunter-Reay, for his first race back on a road course in a long time, I think it was a very, very solid and a pretty good run for him. So congratulations to him on a 17th place finish. I'm glad to see he'll get an opportunity to run some more races with the team this season. Wishing him the best of luck at Mid-Ohio. I think Mid-Ohio is in 2 weeks from now, which of course is Chicago Street Course weekend for NASCAR, and also the other race for F1, which is the Australian Grand Prix. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, how Ryan Hunter-Reay can do. Obviously, Ed Carpenter Racing's had some pretty big struggles this year, but we'll see what Ryan Hunter-Reay can do in that car the rest of the season, and he might end up being full-time in 2024, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to Ryan Hunter-Reay's future outside of the 2023 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about David Starr. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that David Starr will drive the 35 for Emerald Gate Motorsports this upcoming weekend at Nashville Superspeedway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, David Starr has not made a lot of starts so far in the 2023 season. He ran a lot more in 2022, but I think he's been focused on a lot more things. He said he's been trying to get some starts here in 2023. I think this might be his first or second start only of the season so far. Wishing David Starr the best of luck. He's got some good sponsorship and good funding with him for this weekend as well. Wishing him the best of luck and glad to see that he'll be driving 35 for Emerald Gates. I believe this car doesn't have a lot of owner's points going at the moment, so he's going to have to qualify his way in. Hopefully David Starr can do enough to make sure this car can make it into the race on speed. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Matt Mills. As it was shockingly announced that Matt Mills is going to drive the 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports at Richmond and Milwaukee later this season. This may be one of the most shocking announcements I've seen in a very, very long time, but this is a really, really great and an awesome opportunity for Matt Mills. Obviously, Matt Mills bringing JF Electric, which has been a loyal sponsor to him really for the last 4 or 5 years. This is a fantastic and a great opportunity for Matt Mills. Obviously, he's going to be in a truck that easily could win. Kyle Busch has been able to win one race so far. We know the KBM's had some struggles at points, but this is a great opportunity for Matt Mills. And if he wins one of these races in that 51 truck, I think he's going to catch a lot of ice because I think Matt Mills is a decent driver overall, but of course, he's bringing sponsorship funding, which is helping him get this opportunity and the shot. Nonetheless, I love this opportunity for him. I hope he can do really, really good. It'd be nice to see him have a very, very strong run, and hopefully he can have a really, really good run and do great this upcoming, not this upcoming weekend, but a couple months down the road at Richmond and then Milwaukee as well. Hopefully Matt Mills does a very, very solid job in that 51 truck. Hopefully he can do a really good job. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Garage 56. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that it was from a race article that says that the media coverage for Garage 56 is just relentless. It keeps coming. We can't believe it. Rick Hendrick is so excited by it. Obviously, Garage 56 was a car, the Hendrick Garage 56 entry that ran at Le Mans, that was driven by Jimmy Johnson, Mike Rockefeller, and Jensen Button, and went on to finish the race. They did have some driveline and some issues in the car there. They had to go to the garage and fix it, but they did something that has not been done in a very long time, and only the third time in history the Garage 56 car was able to finish the race. And the next-gen car sounded amazing, and there's been so much media coverage. You go on TikTok, and you went on TikTok over the time when this was going on, and so many people were loving and enjoying seeing the Garage 56 entry. The video views for those TikToks was insane, in the millions, and I think that you may see this Garage 56 entry at more different tracks in the near future. Maybe sometime you'll see it maybe next year. Maybe you'll see it back next year. And maybe you'll see a class with more action cars, but maybe Ford and Toyota as well. I love this, so I think this is amazing. I think it's absolutely incredible. We're seeing Garage 56 get a lot of attraction and a lot of attention. And nonetheless, I think it's really awesome and amazing overall. And I'm very happy to see that we've seen a Garage 56 getting the recognition it deserves. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Frankie Muniz. As Frankie Muniz spoke to the media very, very recently and spoke that he technically has a ride secured already for 2024. Now, according to Mark Crystal, he doesn't have enough funding to make it through 2023 and still looking for some sponsorship and funding at this point. Frankie Muniz did clarify that he says he will be racing in 2024, but he is not sure where he'll be racing yet. We don't know if he'll be racing in ARCA next season or maybe moving up to the Truck Series in 2024. Now, I got to say this about Frankie Muniz. Coming this season, I didn't know how Frankie Muniz was going to do. We obviously know Frankie Muniz has been an avid racing fan for a very, very long time, and he did have an early racing career back in the mid-2000s in open wheel, but kind of gave up on that in the mid-2000s. Then just most recently, about 2 years ago, he got back into racing, and I was not sure how he was going to do with the Retta Jones Racing organization, because let's be honest, Retta Jones Racing is not the fastest organization in the world. Well, I've been really impressed with Frankie Muniz this season. Frankie Muniz has finished in the top 10 in all but one race this season. That, of course, was an 11th place finish at Daytona. But his best finish, of course, has been 6th, has still not scored a top 5. But I have been really impressed with Frankie Muniz this season. And he's still learning, and I think he's doing a very solid job. And it's not like Frankie Muniz is just out there to get a paycheck. Frankie Muniz, he has a lot of money. But basically, he's out there to race, and he loves racing. And he says he knows what he's talking about. He knows racing etiquette and races really, really well. And I've enjoyed hearing Frankie Muniz race. I've enjoyed him. Like I said, I've been really impressed with Frankie Muniz this season. And I think that he could get a top 5. And he did have a very fast car. Had a car that could have gotten a top 5. Unfortunately, did go 2 laps on early in the race. Had a bad qualifying run, but did end up finishing in 6th, which I think is very, very solid in the most recent race at Berlin. I really hope Frankie Muniz does get an opportunity to run full-time, maybe, or get an opportunity to run some truck races in the future. It'd be really cool to see him have a shot at that. And I hope he gets an opportunity to run some more races in 2024 as well, like I said, in the Truck Series. So it's really cool to see. I love the fact that Frankie Muniz is talking about his future. I'm glad that he has a future past this year because I think Frankie Muniz overall is a very, very awesome driver. He fits criteria of a racing driver, knows what he's doing, knows what he's talking about. And I love the fact that Frankie Muniz is enjoying his time in racing and hope he gets to run some NASCAR Truck Series races in the future because it'd be really cool for him to have a shot to race in the Truck Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Brody Kaseki. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday afternoon that Supercars Championship leader Brody Kaseki has drawn interest from NASCAR teams that could lead to Drive in Americas later this year. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumors about Brody Kaseki that he'd be racing in NASCAR. Rumors that went all the way back to last year. Now, something interesting to note that I think he's ran by an agency called the Rebus, or his team in Supercars is the Rebus Racing Organization. And something is very interesting to know, Rebus Racing does have some connections with Richard Truex Racing and Joe Gibbs Racing. Obviously, the 19 car does not have all the races set for 2023 at this point, but Richard Truex Racing does have a third car that could be potentially available for them. That could be that 3 car, though. Usually that 3 car is only reserved for the Earnhardt family or for his grandchildren. But could we see Brody Kaseki drive in NASCAR this season? I think the chances are definitely very, very high with that Rebus Racing connection that he has with those teams. I could definitely see him running some Xfinity Series races because likely if he does come and race in NASCAR, from what we've heard, it will likely be in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with a connection with the Rebus Racing Group. But I think it'd be really cool if Brody Kaseki here. Obviously, you've got Shane Van Gisbergen, who basically did race in V8 Supercars, is still racing V8 Supercars. You've got him coming over running Chicago Street Course next week. And I think overall, it is really exciting, though, to see that Brody Kaseki is interested in racing and interested in coming over to NASCAR. I think he's a big fan of NASCAR, a big fan of the sport. And overall, I think it is incredible and amazing to see that Brody Kaseki, who is interested and wants to race in NASCAR, it sounds like there's a really good chance and a really strong possibility that Brody Kaseki might be racing in NASCAR in the coming months and by the end of this year. Hopefully he gets to run this year at a road course race. Obviously, with a supercar experience, he's likely going to run some road course races. I think he's got a good chance to run really, really good in that cars. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Fox Sports. Now, it was reported on Saturday that according to Adam Stern, Fox Sports finished its portion of the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series schedule with an average of 3.315 million viewers. That is down 10% from 2022. Now, something interesting to know from what I understand, FS1 actually was up 2 or 3% compared to 2022, but Fox Sports was down 10%. If there's anything positive from this is the fact that the core audience in NASCAR is growing. The big problem is that 10%. Now, why isn't that down by 10% compared to last year? One big reason, Chase Elliott. Remember, Chase Elliott has sat out nearly half the races so far this season. He sat out 6 races due to that snowboarding injury, and we saw ratings crater almost 10 or 15% when Chase Elliott was not behind the wheel of the car, even though at the beginning here he did have some drops in ratings in the beginning. When Chase Elliott was in the car, we actually saw ratings go up from the previous year. Obviously, some races removed the Fox this year compared to being on FS1. But like I said, Fox had a big drop because of the Chase Elliott effect. Chase Elliott's suspension also dropped ratings at a Gateway by I think 10 or 15%. Also, you had the lighting delay that didn't help. And you also had some races that had weather delays as well. That did not help the situation overall. So overall, all things considered, I don't think it's the end of the world. It is disappointing to see ratings are down from this year compared to last year, but I do believe that next year it probably will go up because last year we had our most people watch in a very long time, I think since like 2018. So I'm disappointed the ratings are down, but I'm also not surprised. I was expecting to be down for the overall standards this year, and like I said, I'm not completely shocked or not completely surprised at all, to be honest, that the ratings were down. Not surprised and not shocked by this overall. To be honest, the ratings were down. Hopefully NBC's portion's up. I imagine there will be more NBC races. I think there's 1 or 2 more NBC races. Obviously, the next 2 races coming up are going to be on NBC. So I'm intrigued. I'm excited to see the upcoming race in Nashville. I'm glad NBC is back. Hopefully NBC can do a really good job with their coverage and also can have some increase in ratings in 2023 compared to Fox's portion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Carl Edwards. Now, Nashville Super Speedway announced that Carl Edwards is going to be at Nashville Super Speedway. Obviously, Carl Edwards is not driving. Carl Edwards has not driven in a NASCAR Cup Series or any sort of car in NASCAR's divisions since 2016. But this is now the second time this year and second time in about a month and a half that Carl Edwards has been around in the sport. Obviously, Carl Edwards has been back in the sport a lot more frequently. And the fact that he's returned to Nashville tells me that he's starting to get that itch back. Obviously, we know that Carl Edwards has been rumbling and rumor. He did say he's not 100% ruling out a return. Something interesting to note, Trackhouse Racing's shop, I think there might still be building that in Nashville, so we might be going to check out that new Nashville headquarters for the Trackhouse team unless they decide to change their mind and decide to not have that. But it's interesting to see that Carl Edwards is showing up to the sport a lot more frequently. Because like I said, there's been a lot of rumors and a lot of rumors that they may go ahead and bring Carl Edwards. And Carl Edwards, like I said, is interested in coming back into sport. I love that Carl Edwards is around a lot more. And maybe NBC is going to go ahead and bring him up in the booth at some point, whether it's for the Xfinity Series or the Cup Series race. I'd love to see Carl Edwards do some more commentary this year because, in my opinion, Carl Edwards has done an amazing and a fantastic job commentating races with Fox. He did an amazing job in the throwback race, and overall, I would love to see Carl Edwards have an opportunity and a shot to commentate some more races. But if Carl Edwards was to return to NASCAR, what team could he drive for? Well, I think obviously it would be Trackhouse Racing and Project 91. Even though that's meant for more international drivers, I think Carl Edwards, with his connections with that team and being good friends with Justin Marks, I would imagine that Carl Edwards would drive for Trackhouse Racing and Project 91 in that number 91 car. So it's going to be interesting. Glad to see Carl Edwards is coming back around the sport a lot more frequently. Glad to see he's returning, and hopefully he'll be able to speak to media. Maybe he'll say, hey, I may have a ride already, but I don't think he's going to. Does he come back? I think it's 50-50 at this point. Maybe, just maybe, though, Carl Edwards does decide to come back and return to the sport. But I'm glad to see this Carl Edwards is back more in the spotlight when it comes to showing up to the track a lot more frequently. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, Bob Parker's talking about the fact about Road America and basically saying that NASCAR should come back to Road America. But something he responded to a fan, I think Dominic Neal, on Twitter, and he basically responded to him saying that Indianapolis Motor Speedway might return to the Brickyard in 2024. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumors around the Brickyard 400 returning in 2024. Number one, the fans want it back. Fans are really wanting to see the next gen car have an opportunity to race on the Brickyard because while I think a lot of the other generations, even the Gen 4 car, which produced amazing racing, didn't always produce the greatest racing at the Brickyard, a lot of fans are very intrigued to see how the car would race on the Brickyard. And if it doesn't end up doing good, fine, just go back to the Indianapolis road course. But I think another second reason is, like I said, the drivers want it back on the Brickyard. I don't think the drivers are as big a fan of the Indy road course race. There's a lot of cars that end up getting wrecked and they turn into chaos, and the racing itself is not really that good on that road course. So I will say the next gen car does have a bigger factor than anything else on that. I think a lot of fans basically all say that Indy cars should only be reserved for the road course, and some will also say that an Indy car should only be reserved for this track and NASCAR should not race there. I think a lot of us want the Brickyard back, and I think it is going to come back in 2024. Like I said, there's a lot of rumors about the future of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway returning there, and I think the chances are very, very high that NASCAR is going to come back to the Brickyard in 2024. Obviously, the schedule is expected to be announced in the coming months. We've heard from people that it's likely going to be coming sometime in August and maybe September at the latest, maybe earlier than last year, because remember, the 2023 schedule was not announced till September. So it is going to be very interesting to see what happens. And I think the Brickyard, like I said, is going to come back in 2024. I think it will return. I think the fans want it, and I think the drivers also want it as well. But it's going to be awesome to see it. And again, I want to see the next car race there. I think the racing, like I said, will be better. I think the fans will enjoy it a lot more. And hopefully, whatever ends up happening, if it ends up being bad, we go back to the road course. Another thing that option they could end up doing is having 2 different tracks every other year. Go to the Brickyard one year, and then go back to basically the road course the next year. Again, I know why fans wanted it back, the Indy road course back in 2021, because like I said, in 2020, the race was not that good. But again, that was with the Gen 6 car. I would like to see NASCAR try out the Brickyard once again, and I think the chances of that happening are very, very high at this particular point, and it may end up happening in the 2024 season, because it sounds like it's very likely going to happen, and I think it will happen in 2024. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX. Now, over the last couple days, the SRX account has been teasing some pretty big announcements. And according to them, they have a deal signed already with a driver. Now, it sounds like from what we know, it sounds like it could be some driver announcements and some sponsor announcements as well. Now, most of the drivers have already been announced for the SRX this season. You've got Haley Deegan, Tony Stewart, Brad Keselowski running the full championship. Bobby Labonte's running the full championship this year. You've got other drivers going to be part of it. You also got Joseph Newgarden, I think, running some races. I think Marco Andretti's back this season as well. Like I said, Ryan Newman's back for the full season. You've also got other drivers coming in on a part team. You've got Kyle Busch coming in. You've got Kevin Harvick coming in. You've got Clint Boyer racing a couple races this year. Denny Hamlin's running a race. You got Daniel Suarez running a race or two. Casey Kane's running a couple races. I think Matt Kenseth's also running some SRX races this season as well. Overall, I've got a lot of drivers who are running the SRX this season. Some people are wondering what drivers could run. Well, I think there's some potential possibilities. Number one, Kyle Larson could be a possibility. Kyle Larson, in my opinion, he is a superstar, and he has a lot of fans from the dirt scene. I think Eldora, there's still a driver that could be available. I think they're coming back to Eldora this season, so Kyle Larson could run that event. Another driver that could run is Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott has ran multiple races in the SRX in the past, and he basically went on to win an SRX race about 2 years ago in the first season of the Nashville Fairgrounds. I think the chance of Chase Elliott coming back could end up happening. What about Bubba Wallace? Bubba Wallace is kind of a superstar, and I think Bubba Wallace would fit the role to be in that series, and I think he'd do a pretty solid job because he's a younger driver. What about another driver who could come in? Maybe Kurt Busch perhaps? Kurt Busch, obviously, he still is not medically cleared to race at this point, but what if he gets a shot and an opportunity to race in the SRX? I think it'd be really, really fun as well. But I really love what the SRX is doing this season. Obviously, they're going to be going ESPN racing on Thursday nights. And we haven't seen a lot of NASCAR drivers, like I said, who are going to be in the SRX this season. I think a lot of that, because a lot of the tracks in the SRX, I think, is working with the NASCAR a lot more. And they're going to be racing on Thursday nights, which I think is big for the future. Obviously, ESPN is not likely coming back on the next TV deal, because the TV deal is likely to be announced in the coming months and weeks. But it's very interesting to see that the SRX, they're going to have some new drivers in this series, and honestly, it's very, very intriguing overall. I think it is very, very exciting that we've got more tracks, more drivers coming in. The tracks are exciting. You've got Alan Bestwick commentating races, and Alan Bestwick, in my opinion, is one of the greatest TV commentators, not just in NASCAR and racing history, and probably in sports commentary ever, in my opinion. And I think it's really cool. You got Joey Logano coming in to do some commentary, which Joey Logano, I think, does an amazing job with the Xfinity Series broadcast. I would love to see Joey Logano get a shot and opportunity to run the SRX in the future. Nonetheless, so I love this. I love that we're going to have some new drivers in the SRX. There's expected to be some announcements this week, and overall, it is really, really exciting to see that the SRX is going to have some more drivers in the season, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming SRX season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about international expansion. Now, there's been a lot of talk about NASCAR going more international in the future. We talked about last week, I think it was on Friday if I'm not mistaken, that Ben Kenny's already been looking at future schedules for 2025, 26, and 2027. Well, according to a new report that came out from Adam Stern, NASCAR experience in the 24 Hours of Le Mans race has already sped up multiple negotiations for international expansion in just the last week. and there is even a hope that it impressed prospective OEMs per sources. Obviously, like I said, Ben Kenny's been looking at future schedules for 2025, 26, and 2027. But the first potential move to international expansion comes with Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which of course is Montreal. Now, NASCAR did race there from 2007 to 2012, and the track always provided some really awesome and really, really great racing. And it sounds like they want to expand back up into the Montreal area, which would make a lot of sense considering the fact that Canada has a lot of NASCAR fans. They've got basically the Penny Series, which has a lot of racing fans as well, not just from Canada, but also from the United States as well. And this track overall produced some great racing. I would imagine that there also are negotiations potentially going back to Canadian Tire, which of course was the Motorsports track, which they always provided great racing for the Truck Series. Outside, I think 2019, the racing was always really, really good there. And then, of course, you do have other tracks outside the United States, like Mexico City, the Autodrama Hernando Rodriguez track, which, of course, produced amazing racing overall. Now, why is NASCAR talking about going international more frequently, though? Well, one of the reasons, you look at every other major sport out there. Every other major sport is expanding globally. You've got the Live Golf and the PGA merger that just happened very, very recently because there was a lot of money coming in from the Saudis. You have other sports like the NFL that expanding to London, expanding to Germany, which of course they're mainly playing in the United States, but they expanded to Mexico City. The MLB, they've been playing in London and they've been playing in Mexico City as well. And you've got other sports that are expanding, and obviously Formula One, they've been expanding their growth in the United States as well, where they only had one race a few years ago, but in the last few years, they've expanded from 1 to 3 races. You've had the Miami Grand Prix acquisition, and then, of course, you've had Las Vegas, which will host their first Formula One race, which is going to be a late-night race, which we're all going to be up really, really late for that event coming up there. But it really is interesting to see that more international expansion is coming into play. And again, I know a lot of fans don't completely agree with international expansion, where I think they should focus on racing still here in the United States, which I do completely agree. But I think if they are going to expand out in the United States, outside the United States, I think Canada and Mexico is where they start. Now, could they expand outside of North America? Absolutely. There are tracks in Europe, and I think Europe would be very acceptable. I think Brands Hatch would be a really good track to go to. You do have the Silverstone circuit, which could be another track that NASCAR could go to. And then, of course, in France, you have Le Mans, which they had that Bugatti circuit that they could end up running if they were racing in France. I know that NASCAR has been in conversations about running in the Middle East, which I think that would not be the greatest decision in the world. But I think, nonetheless, the potential of expansion is very, very high at this point for NASCAR, and it sounds like we could be expanding. But I think more than likely, if they are going to expand out of the United States, I think they start with Canada and they start with Mexico, and then maybe past that, they go somewhere else in Europe. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards, but it sounds like international expansion is very, very likely and is very, very high on the totem pole at this point, and I think the chances do continue to grow, and I think there's a very good chance and a very strong possibility that we are going to see international expansion in NASCAR in the foreseeable future. I'm excited about that. I'm looking for the fact that we may be seeing some international expansion here very, very soon. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, there have been a lot of rumors around the future Junior Motorsports and the possibility of them of jumping up to the Cup Series in 2024. But these rumors have been going around really since the start of 2021. We obviously know that Dale Jr. has been interested and has been trying to acquire a charter, has been trying to get up the Cup Series since the start of 2021. But unfortunately, they've had a hard time jumping up to the Cup Series. Obviously, one of the big reasons why Junior Motorsports has not been able to jump up to the Cup Series at this point is because of the charter money. And the charter money has been increasing since the start of 2021. From what we understand, right now the cost of the charters is $30 million right now. And that has been increasing very, very quickly. And a lot of the reasons is because teams do not want to sell. One of the reasons is because of the TV and the money negotiations and the money revenue negotiations. Obviously, we know the charter agreement right now ends at the end of the 2024 season. And obviously, a lot of teams do not want to give up their charters. But we obviously know that with the charter and the revenue agreement currently at the moment right now, there could be a chance of basically that getting rid of and charters being completely gone. But because Jim France does not want to make them permanent right now, but obviously the teams, they want to make those charters permanent at the moment so they can get more money because the teams are asking for a lot more money and they're asking for a bigger piece of the pie. This is where Junior Motorsports comes in because they've had a hard time wanting to get in because they've been trying to get into the Cup Series for the last few years, but they've had a hard time budging and have not been able to make the jump up currently at the moment right now. Now, do I think Junior Motorsports jumps up Cup in 2024? I think the chances are definitely decent at the moment. I think the chances of them going up are definitely pretty decent. I'll explain why. there is a potential possibility because of one of the Cup Series organizations, and that is Spire Motorsports. Now, when I mentioned Spire Motorsports, well, Spire Motorsports is one of the lowest teams on the Chevy pile, and they've got 2 charters currently at the moment right now. But one thing that helps Junior Motorsports get a charter from Spire is Spire Motorsports has a partnership with Junior Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series right now, where Carson Osabar currently drives the number 77 car for Spire part-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Now, to be fair, the Premier Security sponsorship is a big factor to why that's happening at the moment. But you've got that sponsorship coming into play and helping on that front and on that aspect right now. So I think if Junior Motorsports does jump up the Cup, I think Spire Motorsports is going to be the team that sells their charter. Now, Junior Motorsports does make the jump up the Cup next year. What drivers could they go after, and what drivers could they go with? Well, they're going to need sponsorship and funding, so they could maybe use Brandon Jones, who's currently part of the team, even though Brandon Jones has struggled so far in that number 9 car in Xfinity, which usually is a championship threat and a contender. Though I will say Junior Motorsports Xfinity Series team made a lot of changes and it made a lot of shuffling up in the offseason. I could see them bringing Brandon Jones up. What about Justin Allgaier? Justin Allgaier's driver's driven the Cup Series quite a bit, and he's done, I think, a very, very solid job overall in that car. I think he'd be a pretty solid driver to go with, and I think he'd do a pretty solid job in the 7. Probably did solid in the Cup as well. You've also got Sam Mayer, who could make the jump, and then obviously you've got other drivers they go with. What about Matt DiBenedetto? Matt DiBenedetto will be a very solid driver to start a team. We've seen what he can do with underfunded equipment. We see him be a pretty good contender with Rackley this season. He has won a race with them last year, got their first win in the Truck Series at Talladega, albeit it was a very, very controversial win. But Matt DiBenedetto, maybe use some of that Rackley money and go up, even though I will say sponsorship is going to be a big factor in that, and that could hurt Matt DiBenedetto's chances. What about Kyle Weatherman? That's another wild one. Kyle Weatherman, I think, is an extremely underrated driver, and I think gets the best out of equipment. If he gets a good opportunity, I think that would be a great thing. Now, going back and talking about Spire, why do I mention Spire Motorsports' second charter? Well, Spire Motorsports, you look at the 7 car that Corey LaJoie has. I don't see him giving up the 7 charter. That team is contending for top 20 in points right now, and Corey LaJoie is having a career year in the Cup Series right now. The 77 car, meanwhile, is a worse full-time team at this moment, and Ty Dillon, I think, is sitting 33rd or 34th in points behind Chase Elliott, who hasn't ran the whole season, and behind a bunch of teams that have got hit by points penalties. I think Ty Dillon's Cup career may be done after the end of the year, and I think Aspire was smart. They focus on one car, because I think the 7 car could actually run a lot better. Aspire only had 1 car right now, and they gave that car to Junior Motorsports. I think the field will be a lot more competitive, and you have a much more competitive field going into next season. So I do think the chances are very, very high. I think the chance of Junior Motorsports going to the Cup. Do I think it happens? Yes. I think that they do go to Cup in 2024. I think chances are very, very high, and I think Junior Motorsports has a very strong chance and a very strong possibility going to Cup, and I think they do have a really good chance, and I think it will happen going to 2024. I think Junior Motorsports will make the jump up the Cup at the start of 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. and his future past 2023. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the rumors and rumors about Martin Truex Jr.'s future that goes all the way back to a few years, because obviously for the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about Martin Truex Jr. and if he's going to retire at the end of this season. We thought that there was a chance he was going to retire at the end of 2022, but he made the decision to come back in 2023. Now, so far in 2023, Martin Truex Jr. has had a career resurgence. He currently leads the regular season points right now, and Martin Truex Jr. has already gotten 2 wins, technically 3 if you count the Busch Light Clash, and has gone, like I said, to win 3 races so far in the 2023 season, counting the Busch Clash so far, and just won the most recent race at Sonoma, and like I said, leads the regular season points. Now, Toyota and David Wilson remain optimistic that Martin Truex Jr. is going to return. And you look at Martin Truex Jr. compared to last year, Martin Truex Jr. doesn't have as much pressure on him on personal stuff currently at the moment. So I think he will have a very good chance of returning. I would not be surprised if Martin Truex Jr. signs not only a 1-year extension, but a 2-year extension, especially considering the fact that we all thought Martin Truex Jr. was going to fall off this season compared to 2022, because you go back to last year, Martin Truex Jr., despite the fact he didn't make the playoffs, was consistently in the top 5 in the regular season points. The problem was they could not close out races and could not win races to save their lives, because their best finish, I think, in the year last year was 4th. This year, they've been up front a lot more consistently. JGR has definitely improved as the year has gone on. He's got a really good job. He's done a really good job with the road courses so far in the 2023 season. And like I said, Mark Truex Jr. just feels like he's back to his 2021 ways, or even consistent ways, because not only is he winning races and is one of the best drivers in the field, I think he is one of the easily the championship favorites and championship threats. Now, if Mark Truex Jr. wins the championship, we could obviously see him retire, go out on top. But I don't think Mark Truex Jr. retires. I think Mark Truex Jr. is going to come back next year, and he's got sponsorship funding, which is helping him. Bass Pro's been a loyal sponsor to Mark Truex Jr.'s really since the beginning of his NASCAR career, dating back this time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and his time in the Cup Series and those part-time starts as well. They really like working with Mark Truex Jr. And again, Mark Truex Jr. has been much more happy and has been enjoying life a lot more, and I think he is going to come back next year. I cannot see Mark Truex Jr. leaving JGR at the end of this year, which I think is really good for Joe Gibbs Racing when you think about it, because it's also sounding very likely that Denny Hamlin is going to return to the 11 car next year, because it sounds like FedEx is very close to signing an extension right now with Joe Gibbs Racing, which would be really good for the future of this team, because there was a lot of potential uncertainty with Joe Gibbs coming in this season, because had they lost both drivers, that'd be Mark Truex Jr., Denny Hamlin, both veteran guys, that would have hurt Christopher Bell and Ty Gibbs, because Ty Gibbs, of course, came to the Cup Series as a rookie this season. I think Ty Gibbs, as a rookie, has actually been really, really impressive. If you get both Denny Hamlin and Mark Truex Jr. return at least for a year or two, I think that this team is going to be set itself up for a great future. Now, if something crazy ends up happening, Mark Truex Jr. does retire at the end of the season, or Denny Hamlin leaves the team, John Hunter would be the favorite to go into one of those rides. John Hunter, of course, currently drives the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing at this moment. Even though John Hunter has not made a start so far this season in Cup, I would imagine that they may give him a shot at driving for maybe 2311 in that third car. Obviously, 2311 does have a third car. We know that Kurt Busch, he's trying to come back to the Cup Series sometime this year, but he's got to get medically cleared to get back behind the wheel. But I think, like I said, if John Hunter is the favorite to get into one of these rides, if one of those drivers leave. But like I said, it sounds like at this current moment in the plan right now is that you're going to see Denny Hamlin return to 11 car, and FedEx may add more races, because it's obviously no secret that FedEx has sponsored Denny Hamlin in less races this season, but FedEx is still committed to Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing, which is a really, really good thing, despite the fact they've only sponsored Denny in a few races this season. And Joe Gibbs Racing is long-term committed, and they want both their drivers to end up coming back. So, like I said, I'm very optimistic. It sounds very optimistic that both drivers are going to come back next year. Unless something changes at the last minute and Mark Truex Jr. decides, you know what, I've done enough in the sport, I've accomplished enough, I'm going to retire. I can't see at this point Mark Truex Jr. or Denny Hamlin leaving the team, which is going to be good for Christopher Bell, because Christopher Bell is only 29 years old. The longer you keep them there for both Christopher Bell and Ty Gibbs, the better it's going to be. And then eventually, once those guys leave, you'll have other drivers that go, like Sammy Smith, who will be a little older, and John Hunter Nemechek, who will be a little older, because John Hunter, I think, is 26 or 27 right now, so he's almost 30 years old at this point. And I think this is a very, very good to see. This sounds like the Mark Truex Jr. is going to come back to the team. I think overall it sets this team up for a really, really bright and a really great future. And obviously, I think MTJ, he's having a lot more fun. He's enjoying things a lot more. He's been a lot more lighthearted with their interviews. And I think overall this team is set for the bright future. Unlike last year, remember when they lost Kyle Busch because M&M's left at the end of 2021. When they lost the M&M sponsorship at the end of 2022, Kyle Busch left the team and went to Rich Schultz Racing, which we've seen how good that has turned out for Kyle Busch, and they've been really close in their performance this season up to this point. But it sounds very likely that we're going to see Mark Truex Jr. back, and it sounds very, very good, and I'm glad to see that Mark Truex Jr. is likely returning to Joe Gibbs Racing. Optimism is flowing, and for Toyota, it set themselves up. They're obviously going to be getting acquisition for Legacy Motor Club, which is joining Toyota next year, which I think will be better for Toyota overall. Nonetheless, you got veterans who are going to likely return, and I think it's really good for the future of that team up to this particular point. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below for that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Mark Truex Jr. is returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2024 or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Junior Motorsports jumps up to the Cup Series in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today, I'm going to have race picks for the Truck Series race at Nashville, followed by tomorrow. I'm not sure what's going to be on the channel. Obviously, I'm going to have the Xfinity Series review race picks at Nashville, but I'll probably have something else on the channel. Then on Wednesday, I'm going to have a NASCAR news video on the channel. Thursday will be race picks for the Cup race in Nashville. Friday will be the Truck Series race video along with the NASCAR news video. And then, of course, this weekend, NBC is back. And we've got Nashville back, and I'm excited for the weekend overall, which will be on main NBC at night. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.